Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Mindful Place Summit. Today we have Jones Loflin. He's made it his life work to determine powerful ideas and practical solutions to individuals and organizations struggling with too much to do. His books are described as illuminating and his presentations are unforgettable. Jones' innovative solutions on leadership, change, and time management has attracted the attention of organizations around the world. His client list includes Federal Express, Walmart, Choices Hotels, Toyota, Bridgestone, American Farm Bureau, and the State Farm, as well as the United States military. Jones is an accomplished author and coach. His books include Always Growing, Juggling Elephants, Getting the Blue Ribbon, and Getting to It. He's also the founder of JonesU.com, a series of online courses to help others live life more on purpose. And Jones believes the key to success is being passionate about certain things in life, including family, spiritual beliefs, career, and relationships. One of his favorite quotes by Zig Ziglar, "Go as far as you can see, and when you get there, you can see further." Jones is grateful for the opportunity to work with individuals and organizations seeking better results. He lives in North Carolina with his wonderful wife and their two perfect daughters. Welcome, Jones.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Crystal. Your topic from the moment you reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you?" I'm like, of course, because I love what we're talking about today with this whole idea of being mindful. So thank you for the opportunity.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us. So what are some key routines that you have in your life to ensure you have the physical and mental space to be mindful?
Very good. First one I would have to start with is that morning routine. The first 30 minutes are mine. They're completely mine, to do nothing but to reflect and to look ahead, not only to the day, but even to the longer term. That's certainly one routine I have. Another one is a physical one. I get some type of physical exercise every morning, just so that my body can provide the resources I need to think and act and do throughout the day. Another one's relational. I always carve out time in my day to engage with those people who are closest to me. Now, of course, during the pandemic, that's been a lot easier, but really be intentional about that, not just to hope it happens in the evening, but to actually schedule time in my day to spend time with my now one daughter who's still at home, or my wife, or friends who are a part of my life.
Now, how do you feel setting up your day at the very beginning? Like, what does that do for you? Like carving out that time, if you miss it, right? How do you feel differently from doing it versus not doing it?
Oh, love that question, Crystal. One of the things that it gives me is a sense of peace. It also gives me a sense of purpose, because when I stop and plan my day, to use the language that we hear in productivity, I'm focusing more on the important things and not the urgent. If I don't plan, I just kind of feel a little bit more anxious. I feel like I'm just responding to the next thing that's coming. I spend more time just kind of mindlessly going through my email, or just kind of looking for those urgent things to do. But when I take that moment to plan, I feel like, yes, this is a plan that at the end of the day, when I put my head on my pillow, I can say I accomplished the things that are important to me today, or at least made a really valiant attempt.
Absolutely. It sounds like you're being more proactive than reactive.
Beautiful.
Right?
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So what would you say, to the single parent listening to this interview who's feeling totally overwhelmed right now, and I'm sure we've all, even if we are a co-parent, we've felt that here or there, but that wants to improve their mindfulness.
Yeah, that's, first of all, what a tough situation, especially in the season that we're in. I talk a lot with, parents, and especially those single parents. Wow, it is so hard. And so what many of them say to me is, Jones, I don't have an hour or 2 hours in my day that I can, plan or think or reflect. And my mornings, from the time I wake up, it's crazy, and I don't have time to really reflect in that way. And so I always say, what is in your control? Could you give yourself 10 minutes? Well, yeah, I could probably do 10 minutes. And that's the first step. The second step is, when would that be? Because the challenge is that if you don't put it in your day in a specific place, then other things, take the place of it. And so, and then once they say, well, it would probably be, after lunch or, late morning. And I say, okay, great. I want you to schedule that in your calendar, just like you would a meeting or an event, because it is a meeting. It's a meeting with yourself. And I want you to create a structure or a trigger to make sure it happens. And so for some people, it's after I finish my, first cup of coffee, then I'm going to invest 10 minutes. After I finish checking my email and make sure there's no fires, that's when I'm going to take, 10 minutes. But it's really about what's within your capacity to do right now, not trying to do it all, but what's that small block of time you could set aside for yourself to think and be more, mindful about yourself, but also how you're going to be that day.
Beautiful. As you're speaking, it reminds me of a personal experience as I was trying to find that magic time, and trying to carve. There I was, my children are having, their story time, and I'm going downstairs to kind of find that quiet space. And after a while, starting, carving out the time, I started to crave it. It was like mommy's time out, and understanding that once I was able to incorporate those things, if it's just breathing or just sitting in silence and closing my eyes and leaning against the wall and just letting the wall support me, the more I craved it, the more I could see the shift, right? It was almost like, Mama needs a time out too, and I'll just be back in 10 minutes. And to take that time was like, wow, I value that. And Selfie high five, I'm worth that time. So yes. That's beautifully put. So you're a big fan of the rhyme, being, doing, being in your day. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's all about, rhythms in our day, and we're so conditioned to doing and just, check off the 37 items on our list. And very rarely do we, be, we do all day. And if we have some time in the evening, now I'm going to be. And just as we've started this discussion, Crystal, starting your day with being helps you to see where you are, what's important to you, where you ought to, be focusing. Then you take some action, and then once you've taken that action, it's important to stop and reflect on how well did I do that? Are the right things getting done? What needs to change? Oh, okay. Now I'm going to start in the doing again. But there's a huge need for rhythm, and nobody embodies this more than Franciscan monks. I've read some books where it talks about their schedules during the day, and they start the day with being, like at 3 or 4, in the morning or something, which scares, like, oh, I like to get up early, but not that early. But then they go out and they do certain tasks. Then when the bells ring, they come back and they be. I mean, they have a trigger to come back and be. Well, you're going to think about what you've done and what you got to do next. Then they go do some more. Then the bells ring, it lets them know it's noon prayers or whatever. Then they come back and be again. I love that ebb and flow, because I just think it helps us to stay focused on what's most important.
Absolutely. And as you're speaking about this, I'm thinking about my practice, but then also my children's practice, right? Where it starts with us as parents, caregivers, educators, humans, understanding how that can support us in our everyday. And then once we can figure that out, and it's like you said, scheduling a little bit of time, but I even sit there sometimes in the bathroom, like, Mom's going to the bathroom, and I just sit and do my breathing, because if that's the quiet space, take it while you can, right?
Yeah,
but it's beautiful to then incorporate some of that within your daily life, where it doesn't need to be that extra thing, but it just moves and flows so naturally within your day that if you recognize that you might just be overwhelmed in what's happening, just connect in with that self, right? And grounding that energy and saying, okay, I can now take on that task, or maybe my children are fighting and I can approach them in a more calmly manner because I've really connected with self. And I think that's really beautiful in your story about, the monks and how they incorporate that consistency, right?
Yeah.
I mean, background story, has this always been something that you've implemented, or was it a shift that kind of happened in your life? I'm just kind of curious to know about that.
Sure. There was a shift, probably. I've always been, more mindful of how I use my time. It's just been part of my nature. But in the early 2000s, I as a dad of two daughters, two young daughters, growing my business, and just at that stage in life when you're just kind of going, oh, things are so crazy. And I will never forget a friend of mine, Todd Musig, and I were talking, and he's like, sometimes I just don't feel like I'm, doing my best at work. I'm like, yeah, we all struggle with that. Well, sometimes because I'm so busy, I don't feel like I'm being the spouse or the parent on it. Yeah, we all struggle with that. Jones, I just never have time for myself. And I'm like, he's like, what do I do? I'm like, I don't know. We all struggle with that. And so then he made a comment that later led to one of my books, Showing Elephants. But he says, am I just supposed to run around like my life's some kind of circus? And I'm like, what would that look like? And I won't bore you with all the details of the book, but what really taught me was, we really have to pay attention, be mindful of three key areas in our life. And that is our work, the things we do there, our self, the self-renewal, the self-care, all that. But then we also have relationships. And just like a circus, we've got to pay attention, be mindful of all three, not at the same time, but just to stop and ask ourselves, okay, if I don't feel like I have the energy to be at my best today, what's lacking? Is it self-care? Is it isolation because I'm not investing in relationships with people who, can pour into me? Or maybe I am anxious about work or something, but that was the shift for me in the early 2000s when I began to look at those three areas and ask myself, where does my time need to be invested for me to be at my best self?
Absolutely. And to sum up all those three, like what comes to my mind is life nourishment. Right. And when you look at, maybe one of them is a little out of whack, having, ensuring that you have those three core pillars combined gives you that life nourishment.
Yes.
Right?
Love that phrase, life nourishment, because it is. And just like we talk about the tent being, holding all three rings, it really is important to stop and assess how you're doing. I can't tell you the number of people I've coached that are just feeling overloaded. And I'll say, well, what's overloading you right now? And they'll just go, everything. I'm like, that's not helpful. We can't start universally here. And so you can just draw the three rings and say, okay, pretend your life is a circus, blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting how I say, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate yourself in each of these. And once they see, wow, yeah, I've been hanging out by myself. I need to be spending time with some friends. And like, okay, what would that look like? How could you take the first step? And it really does help them to see, what would nourish me so that I could be at my best when I need to, talk to my children, or when I need to be with my spouse instead of, just kind of hanging out the same oxygen instead of really connecting with them.
Absolutely. And really simply put, I really like that. I see it as like, this is your awareness, right? And you don't know that this could be your awareness. And it sounds like by the mentorship and the guiding that you're providing, these people are now seeing the lens getting bigger, and maybe they weren't aware that they could have that life nourishment. So that's definitely, that awareness piece. It starts with, observing and seeing, where, breaking it down. What does my circus look like? And I'll tell you from a personal standpoint, I went through caregiver burnout, and, I was educating and running center for 10 hours a day myself and 8 children. I was giving my all to the children and my work, and there was nothing left for me at the end of the day. I was sputtering out like a tea kettle. My children, they weren't getting the best mommy. They were getting grumpy mommy. And I really had to give myself that self-check to say, okay, where am I, doing the do or not doing the do or being? And somebody had said to me, Crystal, look at what's happening in your world. It's utterly chaos. And how committed are you to chaos? And it was like this big smack in the face. And I thought, well, I'm not committed to chaos, but I was
exactly.
in it. And how do I get out of it now, right? And it was like that moment of awareness for me to take that step back to say, you know what? I am not committed to this chaos. I do want to be able to take that step back and be able to move and flow and be that person that I want to be. And why was I giving my all to my business and kind of being depleted for my family? And it allowed me to restructure things in my life, but it all came back to connection with self. And I learned to connect with myself so that then I could better connect with those around me, and incorporated certain practices into my day. Well, my tagline is regulate while you educate. right? It's like, oh, I can teach you how to breathe and I'm going to breathe with you. And it's this beautiful flow, right? Or let's just sit in silence for a moment and see what comes to our mind, or focus on sound and vibration. So, you know, when you're speaking, it's just very beautiful to see different, I would say, the ways that we think is it's very similar. It's all under the same tent and umbrella, but the perception, you know, of just referencing it as a circus is just beautiful, because you know, we all live in our own little circus, right? And how do we want it to move and flow so that it works to our advantage? So I just want to say thank you, and give you an opportunity to share anything else with our guests today that are listening around that.
Sure. And Crystal, I had something you said that I think is really important, because we got a lot of people who are listening who are going, well, I kind of got my life together, I think, but I've got people around me who are really struggling. How do I approach them? How do I interact with them to help them have more self-awareness that, hey, your life is chaotic, it's out of control, and I'm concerned about you. And I love what your friend said to you. I'm so thankful they were courageous enough to say, are you committed to the chaos? Well, what do you mean committed? Not all chaos. But you know, it's being that friend who doesn't enable someone to continue in that chaos, but is courageous enough to say, hey, I care about you. And here's what I'm noticing. You know, what can I do to help? And just sometimes getting someone to stop long enough to go, wow, you know, I just haven't given myself permission to stop. And that friend who does that, I mean, it's so incredibly important to do that, so that then you can walk them through. And you don't have to have answers. That's the thing. You don't have to have answers. First of all, you got to have empathy, as you know, just, wow, that's got to be tough. And then you can offer suggestions if you want, but most of the time they just want somebody to listen. And then if you hear something, you can comment, well, you know, wow, here's a place I could help, or have you tried this, or have you thought about this? But it's just so important right now in our world, because so many people feel that sense of overwhelm, but they aren't willing to stop long enough to become aware of what's going on and then to address it.
Absolutely. And when she first said that to me, it kind of kicked me in the gut. You know, it was like, ooh, and I felt it on a physical level. So I thought, oh, I should pay attention to that, because that triggered me. And there's something there that I need to kind of uncover a little bit. And it took me a bit to let go of the ego of, well, wait a second. And then it actually was a pivotal moment in my own personal development to really take a look at, okay, here are my values, here are my husband's values, and our decisions, are we aligning with what we're making? And he actually left a really successful career. I'm not telling people to make these decisions, but for us, what came about it was he decided he wanted to spend more time with our family, you know, 3 young children, and it really just shifted for the good. But it wasn't until that outside perspective came in and said to me, Crystal, how committed are you to this? And then it was the moving pieces around to say, okay, well, we're not committed to this, and how do we make that shift? But having a good coach and mentor was actually very key, because that's who she was to me. And it was almost like my mind just kind of went, whoop. I was just seeing like this. And then I saw it like this. And, you know, made those positive changes with some support and some guidance. And looking back now, thinking, wow, look at how our life was. And it was, you know, the typical rat race. I mean, life still now is busy, but we're able to move in a different manner. And now say, oh, wait a second, I see us going down that crazy path again. Let's bring it back. Let's maybe hire some support. Let's get, you know, how can we better our life nourishment to ensure that we can have this moving and flowing? So very, very beautiful.
Absolutely.
So is there any last statements that you want to leave with our guests today before we talk about kind of your little resource that we have for our listeners today?
You know, there's really not. You touched on something I think is really important, Crystal, is that it's the getting help piece. It's finding a coach or a mentor, finding someone who you can reach out to, who you may think they've got it all together. They're going to tell you, oh, no, I don't. Here's where I struggle, which is important. But you know, is being willing to raise your hand and say, I want to do better. Not, yeah, you want help, but that makes us feel like we're not enough. And we are enough. You know, we're all enough. We're creative, we're resourceful, we're whole. We just need some help in uncovering that. And so I want to do better. I want to be more authentic. And so when I start using that language with people, it's amazing how they go, yeah, that's what I want. Okay, how do we get there? But I think seeking help of any kind is really important because it doesn't have to stay this way. You've got a beautiful story of how you've pivoted and changed time and again to be able to improve so that you could be your authentic self and deliver your best work, be the best parent, be the best spouse, be the best friend. And that's really what we're all after,
Absolutely. So we've got a little resource that you've put together for our listeners today. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where we can find it?
Sure. First of all, I'll give where you can find it. And of course, they'll have the information about my website. You'll have that with them, but it's jonesloflin.com/mindful. Of course, that's MINDFUL, but jonesloflin.com/mindful. I've put together 15 of my favorite strategies, tools, resources to be a better ringmaster of your circus. In other words, to take more conscious control. That's another phrase I use, kind of like mindful. Take more conscious control of your time and energy. What does that look like? And so you can go there and you can find things like the need to quarantine your worry. It's a cool process I learned about several months ago that I love using, especially during this season, so that I don't find myself going throughout the day just being all caught up and worried and anxious. But I actually have a place in my day set aside where I allow myself to worry, and it's amazing how it really helps me focus. But you'll find strategies like that. I've tried to create some very tactical things so that you can quickly go through and go, I think that'll work, and then begin implementing them to be more mindful for yourself. And of course, that's going to lead to being more successful professionally and personally.
That's awesome. I'm very excited for that. And I just want to share so much gratitude for you for taking out the time to sit and have this beautiful conversation. And I look forward to connecting with you again real soon.
Well, thank you, Crystal. Thanks for the work you're doing. Bye-bye.